Okay.
Uh, Good morning, noble friends everywhere, every corner of the world. Today is Saturday, early morning in Washington, USA. I'd like to say good evening to all Thai friends in Thailand. Good morning to Vancouver, Seattle, in Washington. This is a page from Wat Rama and the page of one Puttha Panyana Nantarama in Vancouver, Canada. And welcome everybody to the program of Dhamma for Life. We skip one Saturday, which is last Saturday. Today we return to our regular program of the Dhamma for Life, sponsored by พระอาจารย์พระครูมหาธวัชชัย the abbot of Wat Puttha Panyanantarama. Today, what I have brought is the precept or the ethics, the Buddhist ethics that I hope we all familiar with the 5 precepts, which is what the Buddha mentioned about the 5 precept is they are common, very common to all people, especially the Buddhist person, and common in all Buddhist school. The precepts or the 5 moral virtue or ethics are not something that commands, but it's a set of voluntary commitment, or we call it guidelines, in order to help everyone living life in which can be happy without worries and be able to meditate well. That is, use the sila or the 5 precepts at least as the foundation of constructing the mental concentration. if especially in the area of meditation. So the precepts are supposed to prevent the suffering and to weaken down the effects of the defilements such as the greed, the hatred, and delusion. There were the basic moral instruction which the Buddha gave to lay peoples and monks. Breaking one's sila as pertain to sexual conduct introduce a really harmfulness towards one that practice or the practice of another person if it is involves uncommitted relationship. Everyone who goes for refuge to the Buddha teaching, one will formally take the 5 precepts, which I would like to mention literally today. The first one is undertaking the training rule to abstain from taking life. The second one is undertaking the training rules to abstain from what is not given. The third one is undertaking the training rules to abstain from sexual misconducting. The fourth one is undertaking the training rule to abstain from the false speech. And the last one is undertaking training rule to abstain from drinking, drugging, or any kinds of intoxicant which are the basis of the heedlessness. So these are all the Buddhists often taking the precept in the very formal ceremonies with the member of monastic Sangha, though they can also be undertaken as a private, personal commitment, but it means you don't need to go to ask for the 5 precepts from the Sangha. You can also set your mind up and make a commitment that you will undertaking such a 5 precepts. So that will keep each precept is said to develop the opposite positive virtue. Abstaining from killing, for example, developing a kindness and a compassion, while abstaining from the stealing develop non-attachment. The precept has been connected with the ontological and the virtue which is approach to the ethics. They have been compared with the human right because of their universal nature. And some scholars, especially in many Asian scholars, argue they can complement the concept of human right. Undertaking and upholding the 5 precepts is based on the principle of non-harming. In Pali we call it ahimsa. Remember in one Pali canon comments one to compare oneself with other, and on the basis of that not to hurt anybody. Compassion and belief in the karmic retribution form the foundation of this precept actually. The first precept consists of the prohibition of the killing both human and all animals. Scholars have really interpreted the Buddhist text about the precept as an opposition to and the prohibition of the capital punishment, suicide, abortion, and euthanasia, for example. The second precept prohibits the death. The third precept refers to the adultery in all its forms and has been defined by the modern scholar with terms such as the sexual responsibilities and long-term commitment. While the fourth precept involves the falsehood spoken or the committed to by action, as well as the malicious speech, harsh speech, and including gossip. The fifth precept, which prohibits that intoxication through alcoholic drink, a drug, and by other means. In the early Buddhist texts, nearly always condemn the alcohol, and so in some of the Chinese Buddhist canonical texts. In the practice, however, many lay Buddhists do not adhere to this precept by drinking in common in many Buddhist majority country. Remember once I went to Japan and I was having a dinner, the bartender who's working in the bar, which they also available in many Japanese restaurants in Japan. He's a bartender, so he have to drink because he have to taste the drink that he made. And he has been working regularly as a normal life. It's a part of his career. However, lay Buddhists do not adhere to this precept and drinking in many countries. The Buddhist attitudes toward smoking differ from time to time and region, but are generally permissive. In the modern time, the traditional Buddhist country have seen revival movement to promote the 5 precepts. As for the West, the precept play a major role in the Buddhist organization. There is also a more strict set of precepts called the 8 precepts, which are taken as a specific religion day or the religious retreat. For example, the meditation retreat. The 8 precepts encourage further discipline and model on the monastic code. In the 8th precept, the 3rd precept on sexual misconduct is made more strict and become the precept of celibacy. These 3 additional rules of the 8th precept are: I accept the training rule to abstain from the food at the improper time, not a solid food afternoon, and not until dawn the following day. The next one, I accept the training rule to abstain from dancing, singing, instrumentaling music, and shows, and from the use of jewelry, cosmetic, and the beauty lotion. And the 8th one, and the last one, is I accept the training rule to abstain from the use of high and luxurious bed and seats. And furthermore, the novice monk, or we call samanera, apply the 10 precepts when fully ordained as a Buddhist samanera. Also have a larger set of the monastic precept called, when you are fully Buddhist monk, called the Patimokkha. The 227 rules for the monks in the Theravada tradition, or the Theravadin recension. Monks are supposed to be celibate and are also traditionally not allowed to touch the money. The rule and the course of the conduct for the monk and nuns is outlined in the Tripitaka and under the part of Vinaya. So the precise content of the scripture on the Vinaya differs slightly according to the different school, and the different school or sub-school even set their own different standard for a degree of adherence to the Vinaya. If we're looking at the Mahayana Buddhism, another common set of the moral guidelines are Bodhisattva vows and the Bodhisattva precept, or we call it the 10 great precept. The Bodhisattva precept, which is derived actually from the Mahayana Brahmacharya Sutta, including the 5 precepts with some other additional precepts, such as the precept that against slandering the Buddha's teaching. This exists above and beyond the existing monastic code or lay follower precept. The Brahmacharya Sutra also include the list of the 48 minor precepts which prohibit the eating of the meat, the storing of the weapon, teaching for the sake of profit, abandoning the Mahayana teaching and teaching of non-Mahayana Dhamma. So these precepts have no parallel in the Theravada school of the Buddhism. Let's scan in the 10 wholesome action. We call it Kusala Dhamma, Kusala Kamma, which is another common formulation of the Buddhist ethical action in early Buddhist text. It's a part of 10 good action or the 10 skill karma path. We call it Kusalakam Mabata ในภาษาไทยเราเรียกกันว่ากุศลกรรมบท10 ประการ which are in accordance with the Dhamma. These are divided into 3 bodily action. We call it Kaya Kamma, 4 verbal action. We call it Vachi Kamma, and the 3 mental action. We call it Mano Kamma. All of which are said to cause the unskillful quality to decline while the skillful quality growing. These 10 paths are discussed in many suttas, such as in Majjhima Nikaya. If we looking into the first set of the 10 wholesome action, we call it bodily action or Kaya Kamma. That is, number 1, someone give up killing live creatures. They renounce the rod and the sword. They are scrupulous and kind, living fully of the compassion for all living beings. Number 2, they give up the stealing. They don't with an intention to commit the theft, taking the wealth or the belonging of others from village or the wilderness. Number 3, they give up the sexual misconduct. they don't have sexual relationship with a woman who have their mother, father, both mother and father, brother, sister, all relatives or clan as a guardian. They don't have a sexual relation with a woman who protected on the principle or who has a husband or whose violation is punishable by law, or even one who has been garland as a token of the betrothal. The next one is verbal action. The first one is a certain person give up lying. They summon to the council and an assembly, a family meeting to royal court and ask to bear a witness. Please, Mr. Say what you know, what you not knowing. They say, I don't know, knowing. They say, I know, not seeing. They say, I don't see. And seeing, they say, I see. So they don't deliberately lie for the sake of themselves or another, or for some trivial worldly reason. The next one is they give up a divisive speech, which I share my post yesterday in the Facebook about this divisive speech by taking an example of Vassakara Brahma during the Buddha time, that having a deal with the Buddha and the kings of king of Rishavi. They don't repeat in one place what they heard in another, so as to divide the people against each other. Instead, they reconcile those who are divided, supporting unity, delighting in harmony, loving harmony, speaking words that promote the unity or the harmony of the society. The next one, they give up the harsh speech. They speak in a way that is really mellow, pleasing to the ear, lovely, and going to the heart, very polite or likable or agreeable to the people. The last one in the verbal action is they give up taking nonsense speech. The words are timely, truly, and meaningful in the line with the teaching and training. They say things at right time, which are valuable, reasonable, and beneficial. The next set is the mental action. It is when someone is content, they don't covet the wealth and belonging of others. They have a kind heart and loving intention. The sentient being live free of the enemy, and ill will and trouble, and will be happy. The next one is when someone is content, their life with, they always live with their heart full of contentment. They are loving and live with their heart full of love. They are kind and live with their heart for the full kindness. It is when someone has such a will, there is a meaning in giving, sacrifice, and offering. There are fruit and the result of the good and bad deed. There is an afterlife, They are duty to mother and father. They are being reborn spontaneously. And there are the ascetic and Brahmin who are well attained and practice and who describe the afterlife after realizing it with their own insight. So these are the foundation of life, the sila or the Buddhist virtue, which conducting the physical or the body part of a human being. What I want to talk today is actually about an issue or some conflict issue amongst the Buddhism, or especially in the Western country that discussing about the Buddhist precept. The issue are, for example, killing. In the first precept is an abstaining from the killing of life, and the Buddha clearly said that the taking of the human or the animal life would lead to a negative karmic consequence and was non-conductive to the liberation that was mentioned in Majjhima Nikaya, or many, even though in Mahaparinibbana, which is the largest sutta in the Tripitaka. The right livelihood include not trading in weapons or in the hunting and butchering the animals. In many sutta states that one should always have a mind filled with the compassion and loving kindness for all beings. This is to be extended to hurtful, evil people, as in the case of, in the Tripitaka mention about Angulimala, ในภาษาไทยเราในชื่อขององคุลิมาน the murderer, and to every kind of animal, even pests and vermin. Monks are not allowed to kill any animal for any reason. But Buddhist teaching and institution therefore tend to promote peace and compassion, acting as a safe havens during times of the conflict. In spite of this, some Buddhists, which including the monastics, such as Japanese warrior monks, have historically performed as the violence, especially in China. And I used to visit what is called Shaolin Monastery, develop the martial arts tradition to defend themselves from the attack. Especially in the Mahayana Buddhism, the concept of the skillful means, abhaya, has in some circumstance been used to execute the act of killing. It is being done for the compassionate reason. This form, the compassionate killing, is allowed by อภัยกุศลายะ Sutta and Maha อภัยกุศลายะ Sutta also mention when it follow from the virtuous thought. Some take, acknowledge the negative karmic consequence of killing and promote it out of the compassion. If we're looking at the Bodhisattva Bhumi as a key in Mahayana text, which state that if the Bodhisattva sees someone about to kill another Bodhisattva, they may take it upon themselves to kill this murderer with the thought that if I take the life of this sentient being, I myself may be reborn as one of the creatures of hell. Better that I be reborn as a creature of hell than that is living being having committed a deed of immediate retribution, which should go straight to hell. That makes sense. If then the intention is purely protect author from evil, the act of the killing is sometimes seen as the meritorious. That is about killing. What about war? The Buddhist analysis of the conflict begin with the three poison of greed, hatred, and delusion. We call it mental defilement. Craving and attachment is a cause of the suffering, which is also the cause of the conflict. Many Buddhist philosophers, for example, Shantideva, said in his Siksa Muchaya, one of Buddhist texts, that wherever the conflict arises amongst living creatures, the sense of the possession is the cause. The craving for the material resources as well as grasping to the political and religious will, which seen as the major source of the war. That's what he mentioned in his writing. One's attachment to self-identity and identification with the tribe, nation, state, or region is also another root of the human conflict according to the Buddhism. Buddha really promoted the non-violence in various ways. He tried very hard to encourage his followers not to fight in a war and not to sell or trade the weapon even. The Buddha said that in the war both victor are defeated and or even the defeated suffer. Even you win or you lose, you are suffer. The victor beggars the enmity and vanquish dwell in the sorrow, the tranquil life happily abandoning both victory and defeat. This one was mentioned in Dhamma. The Buddhist philosopher like Chandakiri, his name is Chandra Kirti, wrote the soldiery was not the respectable profession. The sacrifice of life in battle should not be respected, since this is the basis of the harmful action. That's what he mentioned, in his writing. He's one of the great Buddhist philosopher from India. I used to read a lot of books when I was in India. In the Mahayana Brahmacharya Sutra said that those who taking the Bodhisattva vow should not taking any part in a war in any way. In the Abhidhamma Kosa, Vasubantu wrote that the soldier in an army are guilty of the killing of the army, that not just those who perform the actual killing. In the model Buddhist peace activity includes, the 14 Dalai Lama from Tibet, or this Nishan, also mentioned the same and explaining the same reason to the world. The Buddhist idea regarding the war, the Buddhists state that the kingdom have waged war throughout history, and the Buddhists have found a way to justify this conflict. Dalai Lama, who was installed as the head of the Buddhism in Tibet, was by the country Khan after the Orat invasion of the Tibet in 1640, praised the act of the Khan and said that he was an emanation of the great Bodhisattva Vajrapati. Under the fifth Dalai Lama and the powerful Gilak region, Sonam Chopel, treasure of the Ganden Palace, the Tibetan kingdom, launched invasion of Bhutan. I think it was ending in 1640 something, which is regained the previous lost Tibet territory in Mongol. That is very classic example of the war that relating to the principle of the Buddha teaching. Another example is the Buddhist warrior, the warrior monks in the feudal Japan, who sometimes committed organized act of war, which is protecting their territories and attacking the rival Buddhist sects. During the late Heian period, and Tendai school was particularly powerful sect. The influential monastery could wire the armies of the monk. There is one text of this sect was called in Mahayana Mahaparinibbana Sutra, which is contain the passage that allowing the use of the violence for defendants of for the defense of the Dhamma. The Achikaka period, saw the military conflict between the Tendai school, Jodo, Shinshu school, and Nichiren Buddhists. The Zen Buddhism was also influential among the samurai in Japan and Bushido, in Japan that I used to discuss with one a Zen Buddhist monk in Japan where I was involving in the international meditation convention in Japan in Kyoto. During the World War II, almost all Japanese Buddhist temples strongly supported the Japanese imperialism and materialization. Japanese Buddhist society rejected the criticism from the Chinese Buddhists, stating that we now have no choice but to exercise the benevolent forcefulness of the killing one in order that many life, and that the war was absolutely necessary to implement in the Dhamma in many Asian countries. For example, not only Japanese but also in Vietnam. So that's about killing and warring. The next topic that I would like to introduce for you to consider about it is abortion. There is no single Buddhist view concerning abortion, although traditional Buddhism rejects abortion because it involves the deliberate destroying of the human life and regards the human life as starting at the conception. Further, some Buddhist view can be interpreted as holding that life exists before the conception because of never-ending cycle of life. The traditional Buddhist view of rebirth see the consciousness as present in the embryo at the conception, not as developing over time. In the Vinaya, in the Theravada Buddhist text, the causing of the abortion is seen as the act of killing, punishable by the expulsion from the monastic Sangha. The Abhidhamma Kosa mentioned that the life is there from the moment of the conception and should not be disturbed, for it has the right to live. One of the reasons that this is seen as the evil act is because the human rebirth is seen as a precious and very unique opportunity to do a good deed and attain the liberation. The Jataka story, or we call it Chadok, contain many tales of the women who perform abortion being reborn in a hell. In the case where the mother life is the geobody, many traditional Buddhists agree that abortion is permissible. This is the only legally permissible reason for abortion in, I think, the country like Sri Lanka, and is a view that accepted in the Tibetan tradition, which is argued by many Tibet Rinpoche. In the case of rape, however, most Buddhists argue that following an act of the violence by allowing another kind of violence towards another individual would not be ethical. So aborting a fetus that is malformed is also seen in immoral by most Buddhists. So those practicing in Japan and here United States are said to be more tolerant of abortion than those who live elsewhere. In Japan, women sometimes participate in what is called musuko kuyo, a newborn baby memorial service after an induced abortion or an abortion as the result of the miscarriage. A similar in Taiwanese ritual is calling Yingling. I used to attend this ceremony. It's called Yingling Kongjiang in Taiwan when I was layover. In China, abortion is also widely practiced, but in Tibet it is very rare. Thus, the most Buddhists would agree that abortion, which is wrong, they are less likely to push for the law banning the practice. Remember, the Dalai Lama, the 14th Dalai Lama has said that abortion is a negative, but there are exceptions. He said, I think the abortion should be approved or disapproved according to each circumstance. That is very interesting. Abortion is really problematic in the Buddhism. Contraception in generally a non-issue, and the study of the abortion issue has to be continued until the world is settled down about this issue, and that the Buddhist perspective should be really focused on loving kindness and compassion of all beings. The next issue that I would like to discuss before coming to the end of this talk this morning is suicidal and euthanasia that I used to talk earlier, probably last year. The Buddhism understands life as a being that pervaded by dukkha, as unsatisfactory and stressful. Ending one's life to escape from the present suffering is seen as futile because one will just be reborn again and again. One of the three forms of the craving is a craving for annihilation. We call it vipawa tanha. And this form of craving is a root of the future suffering, actually. Dying with an unwholesome and agitated state of mind is seen as leading to a bad rebirth, such as a suicide is seen as creating a negative karma. Ending one's life is also seen as throwing away the precious opportunity to generate the positive karma. So the suicidal action or the suicide does not seem to be interpreted as breaking of the first precept, which is not killing other being. It is still seen as the grave or unwholesome action. It may not be seen or considered as the killing in the first 5 precepts, but is considered and be unwholesome action in the kusala karma. It became unwholesome or akusala karma, which is appear in the akusala karma pata. In the Theravada school of the Buddhism, monks always place the advantage of the dead, including simply telling a person of the misery of life or bliss of dying and going to heaven in such a way that he or she might feel really inspired to commit suicide or simply pine away to death is explicitly said as the breach in one of the highest Vinaya code regarding the prohibition of the harming life. Hence, it will result in the automatic expulsion from the Sangha. The Buddhism see the experience of dying as a very sensitive moment in one's spiritual life because the quality of mind at the time of the death is believed to condition one the future rebirth. The Buddhist idea is to die in a calm state of mind, but conscious state. With the conscious state, while learning to let go and dying consciously with our negative thoughts, rather very joyously with the good thought in the mind, seen as a good transitional into a next life. Chanting and reciting the Buddhist text is a common practice for the patient in the bed that's about to die, especially seen in many cases in Tibet. The Bardo Dodo is used to guide the dying to a good rebirth. In the traditional Buddhism would hold the euthanasia where one bring about the death of the suffering patient as to prevent the further pain or the serious stressful pain as the breach of the first precept. The arguments that such a killing is an act of the compassion because it prevents the suffering is unacceptable to traditional Buddhist theology because it's seen to be deeply rooted in the delusion. This is because the suffering being was euthanized would just end up being reborn and having a more suffer due to their karma. Hence, the killing them does not help them escaping the suffering. Clearly, the killing of one sick and aged patient is an act of delusion. The act of the killing someone in the process of death also ruin their chance to mindfully experience the pain and learn to let go of the body. Therefore, desire for the euthanasia would be a form of aversion to the physical pain and the craving for non-becoming. The choice not to receive the medical treatment when one is terminally ill is therefore not seen as a moral reprehensible, but as long as it does not arise from the feeling of aversion to life, this would also apply to not resuscitating the in the terminal patient. However, there are exceptions to the injunction against the suicide. The several Pali Sutta contain the story where the self-euthanizing is not seen as authentically by Buddha, showing that the issue is more complex. These exceptions, such as the story of the monk Shanna, that and the monk called Wakali, typically, the Wakali, the one who really loved the physical appearance of the Buddha, typically deal with the advanced Buddhist practitioner. In this exceptional case, both Shanna and Wakali are both said to be enlightened Arahat and euthanizes themselves in a calm and detached state of mind. Those are exceptional. So these are the issues that still discussed in many regions or many countries relating to the law of the different states or the different country. And I think it will be continue to discuss and study more in order to truly understanding the concept of the suicide, concept of war, concept of killing, concept of euthanasia or the compassion killing, การุญยฆาต So I hope my talk today will give you some idea to continue the study and to understand the ethical issue or the virtue or the moral conduct or even the precept of the Buddhism that leading to implementation in many area of the society. We will come back to see you again next Saturday early morning. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching this program. I will pass this back to Ajahn Tawachai and have a great day. Bye bye.